Hello, good evening all. Welcome to IIFl webinars. We have today with us Mr. Ujjwal Shah, the fund manager for Dynamic Fund at IIFl Securities. I would request Mr. Ujjwal Shah to please take this ahead.
Yeah, Neetu, I was just thinking if we should wait for a
Yeah,
couple of
sure. We
minutes.
can surely wait a couple more minutes and then we can slowly start this out.
Sure, Neetu, thanks a lot.
Hello, everyone. We are just waiting for a few participants to join in.
Neetu, shall we start now?
Yes, Ujjwal, I guess we can start it.
Great. Hello and welcome to all the participants on this webinar. I hope you and your family are keeping safe and well. Today's topic from my side, I'll just introduce myself. Myself, Ujjwal Shah, fund manager for the Dynamic Fund at the CAT3 AIF for IIFl Securities. Today's topic, we are trying to cover a few pointers. We are trying to avoid all the noise that is around regarding so many topics, and we would rather advise our clients and people to rather focus on the India story, which continues to show promising signs ahead. So without taking much ado, I'll help you all through this small presentation, and then later on request all of you all to post your questions on the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to answer those. So currently, Indian investors as well as global investors are worried about these 4-5 pointers, basically inflation, which is showing an ominous sign right now, globally as well as in India. The Fed rate hike, which people are perplexed with. The UP elections, we all know how important it is, and how that will have an impact or a bearing on the upcoming budget and the policies of the government, as well as COVID. So whatever people are reading these days, maybe through newspapers or even, all the other webinars or people are generally talking about, are these fears in the market, which are actually clouding a lot of positives that are happening on the back burner. So first I'll address these issues, and I'll then take you all through the India story, which I want you all to see. On the inflation part, there are basically two types of inflation. One is chronic and one is transitory in nature. Now, currently the inflation looks terribly high, especially on the global arena. But a lot of that is because of the transitory nature of this inflation. And what do I basically mean by transitory? It is happening because of certain conditions which will eventually ease out, and that inflation will not be there. Rather, the chronic one is more stickier one, more demand driven, and that is something which needs to be curtailed. So the transitory one has basically 4 avenues which is hampering that, and one is the supply chain disruption. We all know what COVID has done to the entire supply chain globally, be it the shipping industry, which is facing, the turnaround time for ships have increased due to the amount of checking that is done per ship, as well as because of COVID, there are so many areas or ports which are clogged. We have flights which are getting cancelled. So because of COVID, we have seen a lot of disruption internationally as well as nationally. But as we are seeing from the time of COVID to the situation right now, even from the words that I had with the chemical people and the companies, things are easing out a bit, especially from China, which was causing a lot of inflationary trend. Even in India, chemicals were not available, APIs were not available. The basic raw materials for a lot of our industry which are dependent on China were not available because of the supply chain disruptions are now easing out. Even the pricing, the chemical prices have dropped or crashed significantly. You can see across commodity prices had softened up a bit. So this supply chain disruption over a period of the next 6 to 12 months is for sure to ease out, which will have a bearing on the inflation itself. Labor shortages is something because of transportation, because of people migrating back to their natives. Labor shortages had become very evident. Apart from that, in India, countries like UK and the inflation rate that is very high in UK right now can be attributed more to this labor shortages, because European people, post-Brexit, EU people who were residing or working in UK have actually transited back, have not returned back to UK because now they need visas, now they need more documentations, and that is hampering UK because they are facing shortages, labor shortages, and which is hampering their supplies. Supplies are getting distorted, and that is causing inflation. Third is green energy. Now, the move that the EU zone has had towards renewables, and they have chucked out coal from coal plants. All these EU nations are chucking it out. Now, renewables have their own issues, you know. It cannot be a dominant source as yet of energy. And now when the demand is so high, EU zone is facing power shortages, and therefore the power cost has gone up, and which is having a bearing on their overall cost. And thus the inflation has gone up. We all know that oil prices are increasing. Maybe it's the Russia-Ukraine tension, and we can also attribute to OPEC, which is not increasing the supplies. So a lot of these issues are not really chronic, and solutions will be found out over next 6 to 12 months, and the inflation will ease out. What needs to be seen is whether the central or the governments globally and the Fed probably will be very aggressive in price hikes. It's to be seen, because they wouldn't want their demand to fall by any means. US, as I rightly told you, our inflation, different countries have had different reasons. US, they gave out stimulus checks to millions of people. Fuel cost went high because, you know, shale gas is not pumping in as much as it was before because of the fragile business. Global supply disruptions have hampered them. UK, as I told you, Brexit has hit them hard. Also, driver shortages, labor shortages have hampered their supplies, which is causing the inflation currently. Once this eases out, we will see inflation coming down globally. So then the question arises that, you know, inflation will obviously lead to Fed rate hike, and how do we pursue, or how do we see that hampering the markets ahead? So what we did was, we did an exercise. We went back to 1990s till date. We saw when had the Fed gone ahead and increased their interest rates by at least 0.75 or more. And we found out this 6-7 examples in terms of years when the interest rate hike was as high as 2.5% to as low as 0.75. And we couldn't find any conclusive evidence to state that, you know, Fed rate hike actually means that the markets are going to tank. Rather, there were certain years between 2004, 5, 6, when markets did increasingly well. Not only the overseas market, but even the domestic market. There were years when, you know, there were pertinent issues regarding other economic baggages that the countries were bearing with, and therefore the Fed rate hike coincided with that, which led to market decline. So there is a clear evidence that Fed rate hike alone cannot lead to severe corrections in the market, as history points it out to us. In case there are other incredulous events which coincide with this rate hikes, then there can be a bearing on the markets, and thus we did not need to be extremely worried about this rate hikes. Also, we need to keep in mind, as I rightly pointed out before, that a lot of inflation easing would happen at the second half of this financial year, and then we have to possibly see how the Fed reacts. Does the stance become more dovish going forward, is what we need to monitor. But in case if they increase it, history suggests that we are not in for a very, very difficult time, as we can see from this chart over here. Then comes India. India per se issues a lot of hues and cries are already in because of the UP elections. We all know it's the mother of all state elections in India. It has a huge bearing in terms of the seats it has in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And we know that BJP government has a lot at stake with this election in right now. With the battering that they had in West Bengal, they are surely going to go full out for this state election, which also points us out that possibly this budget would be pro farmer driven. No big bang policies would be announced over next 3-4 months until this election passes out. We might also not see very big fuel rate hikes coming in, as we can see right now as well, with Brent rising across. Fuel hikes have been curtailed right now. So all focus would be to this election, and because of that, a lot of policy would also tend to be favoring the farmers, as we know how the UP is in terms of the dynamics of agriculture. COVID situation is actually being appreciated globally, and therefore I can fairly say we are enjoying this kind of premium to other emerging markets right now. Uh, if this virus does not mutate any further, and if Omicron is the virus which continues to remain ahead, we would see worldwide people would come out and just treat this as any other flu or influenza that is there pertinent globally right now. Because Omicron, as we all know, has not had the kind of impact that Delta had in the uh, previous drives that went by. So India, on the other hand, the vaccination drive has been really strong. We have crossed 150 crore doses, which is appreciated globally. The kind of uh, the demographics that we have, the states, the amount of people and the load that the government has taken to achieve this kind of thing is really, really appreciative. And this is actually giving us the premium over emerging markets. So a lot of people keep coming and sharing historical figures saying we are at such premium to other emerging markets and therefore correction is due. But we need to understand how the global investors are perceiving the overall markets and where India is placed right now, and why everyone is giving India that kind of premium. So be it other nations, Russia is facing war-like situation with Ukraine, China, anti-China sentiments, we all know how that is going on globally. Brazil with predominant agri focused agrarian economy that it is, and the way we have handled this COVID like situation speaks a lot about our government and its intentions ahead. And therefore the premium that India gets over other nations might persist for certain time, is what I believe, until more big budget policy announcements would be required by the government. So coming back, if we leave aside all these fears and all the noise and just focus on the India story, there are a lot of positives that did come through in our news, and through papers we could have seen these positives which are developing in the country. But because of all this noise surrounding inflation, Fed rate hikes, we have not given that much of importance to all these pointers, which I want to bring it to your notice. One is SIP contribution crossing 1 lakh crore. Now, this is a big landmark news that should have flashed across. People should have talked a lot about it. Finally, this is financialization of assets, which is happening in Indian markets, and this will augur well for the markets. The depth of Indian markets will increase by leaps and bounds going forward. More and more people are using this avenue to enter the markets for the long term. People are investing, booking in for next 3 to 5 years, and this kind of uh, move away from the prehistoric nature of savings to towards equity markets is unparalleled, and this by far is one of the biggest news which helps us think that going forward we would have Indian and the domestic DIIs would be pretty strong in terms of evading any kind of mass selling that can happen from the likes of FIIs. So this augurs well for the depth of the market and the strength of the market is how I see this particular news which happened a month back or so. Capex is coming in a big way. We are seeing not only because post COVID, a lot of demand has increased on the real estate side. Real estate is marking a comeback. We are already seeing green shoots around here. In terms of export driven industries are putting in a lot of capexes. China plus one, the PLI scheme that government has announced. Apart from that, metals have made a comeback, repaired their balance sheets, and they are announcing capexes. Cement, which had lied low over past 2 years, have again all the large cap cement companies, be it Ultratech, be it Shri, Dalmia, Ramco, all have announced capexes. They are expanding their capacities. So after a very long time, we are going to see a capex-led growth over next 2 years, 3 years. Corporate leverage has dipped in FY21. We can also see the central government is pushing for capexes. There are railways announcement, even the roads, airports, big bang announcements are happening around from the central government side, which will all augur well for capex. And we might see next 2 to 3 year a capex-led boost, which can happen to the GDP. Over a period, we have always seen that whenever the commodity cycle has been strong, the capexes do tend to rise, because whenever commodity players announce capexes, those are being big budget capexes. They cannot announce smaller expansions in their plans. So whenever they come out strongly on the capex side, the private capex just shoots up, and we are already at the verge globally as well, seeing that kind of a commodity-led capex drive happening. Why is it happening? A lot can be attributed towards movement towards the electrification. The EV drive globally has taken a big impetus, and aluminum, for that example, cars are getting converted to or shifting towards more and more aluminum parts. So is copper, nickel. We are seeing use of them in the batteries as well. Across the board, we are seeing a lot of development as well that the companies are doing, and US coming up with such a big infra plan that they have announced would also give a major support to commodity prices going forward. So all in all, globally as well as domestically, we are seeing capex being driven by commodity, good commodity cycle as well. If this cycle actually points out to that, globally, capex cycles do tend to start and end unilaterally. So this happened between 2003, 2008 as well, and 2022 looks good on the global scale as well. There are green shoots available across, and certain companies, Indian companies, which are already providing goods globally, are already hinting to this. So that is again a good sign, which we can see for actually export dependent companies in India. Tax collections are also signaling to robust profitability that happened in FY22 and FY23 as well, would see very robust collections, because demand itself is showing very ominous signs of improving ahead. Exports, as I have pointed before, the recent years export numbers are basically amongst the best in last decade. Uh, this actually points out to India being a preferred destination, and therefore export-led companies, be it on the chemical side, pharma side, IT although is on the service side, but if we tantamount them to exports of services, we can see overall India benefiting in terms of serving the outside world. The PLI scheme would further accentuate this case where exports would further rise. On the chemical and pharma side, we are any which way seeing that India is being preferred over China for that instance, and the China plus one strategy is helping them out. Tiles, we all know that Morbi has become an export hub, and rather than focusing on the domestic market, the export orders are such big that they are into their capex mode right now as well. So all in all, if India continues to be the preferred destination that it is, the bearing it would have on the overall GDP, also on the CAT situation, and in terms of profitability of our corporates would be humongous. And this is something which we need to closely monitor and rather focus upon. GDP growth expectations of all big uh, you can say rating agencies, as well as the likes of Bank of America, UBS City, World Bank as well. Everyone is pointing towards 9% and 8% over average, I'm saying, over next 2 years. And we would possibly be amongst the best performing nation in terms of GDP growth. And that's why we would continue to receive the kind of premium we receive over other nations which are still struggling to come back in terms of growth, and therefore corrections can happen, might be sharp, might be shallow, but that should be something that should be bought into and should not make us start feel that we are into a pertinent bear market. So in terms of the overall story, the whole idea is we remain positive on the India story in the medium term. We remain buoyant. Our belief is to focus on the positives. We know there are headwinds ahead. We know this year is not going to be the same as last year. But if we avoid this short-term hiccups, the long-term outlook of India remains unperturbed. Undoubtedly, there would be short-term hiccups that this market might have to endure. But if we look at a 3+ year view on the Indian markets, we are sure to bounce back very strongly from this situation. We were already seeing before Omicron hit us, we were already seeing ominous signs, be it real estate, travel, be it commodities, be it infrastructure, the amount of investments government was making. Every aspect of India was already showing ominous signs of strong growth ahead. Omicron might have slowed it down for a quarter a bit, but we are sure to bounce back to some very good numbers going forward, and that should support our markets at every juncture and give us chance to grow ahead. Coming to our dynamic fund, we are having a very good response in terms of the initial investments that have come through, and I would like to thank all the members who have and this participants who had contributed to this. Our performance is also heartening, although the time frame has been only 3 odd months, but we have outperformed the benchmark index by 260 bits as of now, as on 31st December. And if you look at Jan, we have actually grown quite handsomely. The numbers for Jan would be obviously shared to you via fact sheet in this coming month. But the whole point is the direction where we are going. Our plan is to keep doing what we are doing right now, keep bettering in terms of the outperformance that we are looking at going forward. And that is what we aim to do. If we look at the strategy for the year ahead, how we are seeing is, we agree to it. We think we should be nimble footed in FY22. We should be very selective, and we should have tapered expectations. Unlike 2021, when we were witnessing a broad-based rally, आप कुछ भी उठा लो, सब चल रहा था. FY22 or this 2022 is rather going to be a stock pickers year. We have to be choosy. We have to be selective. We are already seeing signs where stocks have been thrown away on a bad result. Profit bookings have been very sharp. 20-30% kind of falls in mid cap and small cap stocks have not been easy before, but now they are happening again after a year when we are seeing a very hunky-dory kind of a situation. We are back to a situation where we have to be selective, and stock selection would matter a lot. We should understand economy does face headwinds. First half would have your UP elections, second half would have Fed rate, knee-jerk reactions bhi aayenge market mein. So we have to be prepared for all this kind of situations that markets throws at us during this year. So पिछले साल का बैगेज मत रखिए सर पे, वो माइंडसेट से ये साल में इंट्रोड्यूस ना कीजिए खुद को. And we should have moderate expectations. We all know at what levels the market are. We should understand that in terms of headwinds, in terms of margins, we can't have as good a year as 2022 was. And therefore, moderating your expectations will make you select your investments betterly. You would be more realistic when you buy stocks, right? And lastly, corrections are healthy for the markets. They help us weed out our excesses. कोई भी गलती की है past में, it will help us correct those. Rather, corrections will help you enter into good high conviction stocks जो आप पहले नहीं ले पा रहे थे, बहुत महंगे हो गए थे. So portfolio rebalancing can be done at corrections. Whenever that opportunity comes in, do that. Restructure your portfolio, get into your high conviction stock ideas, weed out of those excessive high risk zones, and that would help your portfolio a bit. Sorry for that. Lastly, in terms of dynamic fund, our idea is to keep focusing on alpha generating ideas. We were very cautious 3 months back, and therefore our portfolio was highly tilted towards the large caps, which were around 88 to 90% of our portfolio 3 months back. During the last correction that happened when Nifty corrected till 17,000 and less, we strategically started investing in high quality mid cap ideas where we knew there would be a high level of alpha generation. And therefore, from October to December, our alpha generating ideas percentage of investment has increased from 10 to 17%, and it is still increasing in this month as well. So we intend to further consolidate our position in existing alpha generating ideas as well as new ideas. We are finding in new ideas at each juncture, and we are trying to get in at our price where we find that comfort of generating that alpha for our investors. Just to give you an idea, we had initially invested in a chemical giant, and since our investment, that stock is giving us a return of 40%. We have invested in other alpha generating ideas, and except one idea, I would suggest all others are giving double-digit return already. So this is the kind of return that we are already generating from our alpha generating ideas within this 3-4 month period. We are scouting for more such ideas, and at each corrections, mind it, we would surely get into more such high conviction bets, which will help us generate alpha and beat the Nifty the benchmark index by leaps and bounds ahead. So our focus is and will continue to be to generate risk-adjusted superior returns for our investors. And lastly, I'm not scaring people out, but we would like to be a puff adder. And just to help you understand what a puff adder is, he is an ultimate ambush predator who can lie motionless for weeks waiting for its prey. So we are someone who do not mind waiting for our stock ideas to come at the price which we think will generate the kind of alpha which we want for our investors. We would not want to risk our investors' money and buy into stocks which later on at corrections would dip significantly and hamper our return profile. So that was more about the presentation. That was more about the fund, that how it is performing and what we are doing at our end. I'm happy to take the questions right now. I am thankful for your time. You all can please ask your queries and I would be happy to answer them. So Devesh has asked a question about are we seeing market is going up and is it sustainable or what's the ground of it? See, Devesh, rather than betting on the market, bet on stocks. So bet on stocks, bet on sectors, because, irrespective where the market goes, if your sector is doing good, if your stocks are doing good, you will get advantage of entering and exiting the stocks at your price, and that is how market gets shaped up. So if you are seeing that let's give you an example. IT is supposed to do well for next 1 odd year. IT has a weightage of around 70% already in the indices, Nifty index. You look at banking and finance, the worst seems to be over in terms of where the banking index was in terms of the bad NPA cycle that it went through. Rather, we could have surprises ahead, in terms of performance. We are already seeing the private banks coming up with very strong results, be it ICICI to name for the sake. Kotak has been strong with its book. Even SBI is performing well. So in terms of banking and finance also, we are not seeing the kind of impact that could possibly lead to a major correction in the market. If you look at pharma, if you look at capital goods, there are signs that improvement is ahead. Reliance, aage chal ke demerger story might come in. So there are, in terms of आप सिर्फ market देखोगे तो you would always find reasons to sell stocks. Rather, see the story. Where do you think India should be in next 2 to 3 years in terms of overall growth? Will these companies which you have bought will participate in that growth story or not? And you will find your answers to it. Satyajit, I cannot specifically talk about shares, especially on which we can buy before the budget or something. But I can just tell you that sectors which are actually doing good. So आप ये समझ लीजिए कि IT for next 1.5 year continues to do well. Obviously, we need to be cherry picking in IT sector because a lot of IT stocks are at very high valuations, and that leaves little upside for investors. In terms of before the budget, sectors which can actually perform well. Infra is supposed to do well. But budget per se, what has happened, BJP ne budget pe se focus hi hata diya hai. That has become a very generic subject now. Unlike before in the UPA government that was there, where budgets used to be a big day and big announcements used to come in the budget only. BJP ne wo sara sham budget pe se hata diya hai. So you now do not see a very budget rally or a budget correction that happens post the event, So I wouldn't want to dwell much into it. So Sandeep, I'll share our fact sheet with you, and you will find all the relevant details with you on that, right? So Sagar Dev. So again, on the budget, Sagar, I did mention, it would be a pro-farmer budget this time round for sure, because, there are some very important elections lined up. Government also has to shore up a lot of funds. Oil is at a historic high, and you can't keep increasing oil prices the way they had last year. So they will need to shore up a lot of money as well. It's going to be an interesting budget that we need to keep a tab on. But impact wise, आप देखो, आजकल कोई वो प्री बजट नोशन भी नहीं आ रहे ज्यादा, and it's hard to see impact budget का रहता भी है तो it's only of a 5-10 day window. So let's avoid thinking very narrowly, drawing down our attention to only a span of a few days, weeks, or months. Let's start thinking 6 months, 12 months, or 2 years down the line, and that's where the India story is going to pan out. So a good question that has come up is, what are your views on India's fiscal deficit and impact on the strength of the INR vis-a-vis other currencies? So at some point, my belief is that INR, if inflation does rise, INR will tend to depreciate. That will have a bearing on the INR as well. And we cannot keep INR dismissively high against other currencies if we want our exports to be competitive, right? So at some point that correction might come in, but that would be moderated by RBI in a way that it does not hit us hard. In terms of India's fiscal deficit, I do not see government right now. Globally, आप देख लो, no one is really worried on fiscal deficit, considering the pandemic has hit everyone, and everyone had to take stands and open their purses for the economy, for the people, and that impact might continue for a year or two. Fiscal deficit repair is not a thing which will happen in a whim. It is a 2 to 3 or 4-5 year period window where we might again see our fiscal deficits come back. And one thing you all should focus on is, despite running such a high fiscal deficit, we are actually at this last year, we actually were at all-time highs. So even the FIIs and the investors, the by and large, the so-called big investor community is not really worried about the fiscal deficit right now. The more worry is we do not enter in a phase of a recession or a stagflation kind of a phase, which can hinder the prospects going forward. So one anonymous attendee has asked for the list of alpha stock itself. So अगर मैं वही बता दूं तो फिर आप मेरे साथ invest क्यों करोगे? So I would rather ask you to come and invest in the AIF dynamic fund, and you would reap in the benefits of the alpha stocks that we are buying into. Sandeep Sarkar has asked, what's the allocation between large cap, mid cap, and any allocation in debt fund? So Sandeep, we are totally equity focused fund right now. We do not have any allocation to debt funds. The current, as I rightly pointed out, large cap was around 83% as on December 13, which would have further gone down in the current month. But as on December 31st, December, large cap was 83, and our mid cap alpha generating ideas were 17%. To share with you, if markets correct, our fund can have an large cap to mid cap mix of 65 to 35 as well, and we are open to that. So if we get the right opportunity in right stocks, we are open to betting big on the mid cap space as well. but those would be purely based on valuations, purely based on the alpha generating ability of those stocks. And if we find that comfort, only then we would enter those stocks. Dhanil has asked, China has warned the US and Europe against a rapid rise in interest rates, would slam on the brakes on global recovery from the pandemic. And that's a very fair statement. So even, they have come up with announcements which are going to happen at a later stage. They are not increasing interest rates every month or every 15 days. They are also periodically going to monitor how the situation is panning out, and then they are going to take the call. Abhi jo guidance diya hai, that is a guidance for next 2 years, considering current situation prevails. If we see situation easing out, inflation easing out, which everyone is expecting, over the next 6 months, 8 months, 10 months down the line, the transitory inflation will have a low bearing, then they would change their stance. They would not go so aggressively on interest rate hike, and they would rather let that tapered inflation to stay, and आपका hike भी उतना ही कम होगा. So we also think that ominous increase can actually have a huge bearing on the global demand. US सिर्फ खुद का नहीं देख सकता, because now it is a global village, right? So if your policies can hinder demand elsewhere, it will come and backfire you as well, and they know it very well. So we need to see how they do it, but the signs are such that some inflation slowdown would happen at the second half of 22. So Kiara Chera has asked, how do you see PSU stocks? Shall one invest or can ignore? So Kiara, one thing is for sure, except for SBI, I wouldn't be investing in any other PSU bank stocks. Other PSU stocks, you need to cherry pick those ideas which are available at sub 10 kind of a P, and which gives you a very good dividend yield. तो फिर वो downside आपका protect हो जाता है. Are you seeing any very strong growth in any of the stock? I wouldn't say so. But yeah, oil prices going up will have a bearing on ONGC. Yes, it will have. How much of a bearing it would have needs to be seen. So stock specific you can select, but I wouldn't buy the basket. We all know what kind of shitty things happens at PSU level, and what kind of dependence they have on the government, and how the stance changes from the company being a pro-growth company to being, pro-people company. So now we all know how Coal India did, until this global coal pricing cycle increasing, Coal India was, lying unattended rather. कोई देख भी नहीं रहा था वो stock को for like 5, 7, 10 years, So one has to be very selective in picking a PSU stock, and choose only stocks which are, जहाँ पे आपको पता है कि it is a well managed thing जो आप देख सकते हो. Devendra has asked, will the good small and mid cap stocks continue to do well in 2022? Very well it can, Devendra, and rather that is what we are trying to say. If you find good stocks in the small and mid cap space, and study them, देखो कि वहाँ पे क्या growth के expectations हुए हैं over next 2 years, 3 years, but buying a stock at 60, 70 ka PE, if that stock is only growing at 20, 30, you are actually 2 साल का return तो already stock is pricing in right now. Then your holding period increases. Or you are thinking that, मैंने 70 पे लिया, कोई 80 के PE पे आके ले लेगा, that is where I'm going to make money, then it's a different thing. But don't think it is going to be a broad-based rally जहाँ पे small cap and mid cap पागल की तरह भागते रहेगा. Although currently also आप देखिए तो कचरे stocks भाग रहे हैं आजकल. बहुत सारे investment ideas are coming for stocks which are sub 10 rupees, जिसमें कोई value नहीं है. लोग आजकल सुजलॉन भी बाय बोल रहा है, जेपी इंफ्रा भी बाय बोल रहा है, और इसी में है ना इन्वेस्टर्स अटक जाता है. प्रॉब्लम क्या है, वो क्विक मनी के चक्कर में जो आपने लास्ट पूरे साल हार्ड एंड मनी कमाया ना, यू स्टार्ट पुटिंग इन सच स्टॉक्स एंड 1 साल के लिए वेटिंग पीरियड हो जाता है, एंड दैट इज नॉट एन एक्साइटिंग स्पेस टू बी. हम सब ने वो पहले कर लिया होगा, एटलीस्ट अभी हम लोग को वो नहीं करना चाहिए. Satyanarayana, surely I would request Satyanarayana to approach. You would have my mail ID, or you can just drop me a mail. It's ujwal.shah@iifl.com, and I'll surely share you all the details of the dynamic fund. Sanjeev Chamoli has asked me on his view on fintech companies. We already have a fintech fund, and I would rather request you to approach them and get more insights on the fintech companies that they are investing into and the space as well. They are the right people to, talk about this. Also, he asked about insurance sector. So last pura saal insurance sector ne kamai bahut kiya, but like I was explaining to the participant before, the stocks have not actually performed. Why it didn't perform? Because HDFC Life was one of the highest price insurance company globally. Abhi last pure saal it stood at that 600 to 700 ka range. It didn't move. Have those insurance companies done well? Are they going to do badly going forward? No, rather it's a very good space to be in. But अगर आप 5-10 साल के लिए buy कर रहे हो ना, you should buy insurance for your children. आप इंश्योरेंस खरीदो मत, इंश्योरेंस स्टॉक ले लो. You need to understand we are very under-insured country overall, be it in terms of life, be it in terms of medical. This pandemic has changed the way people look at insurance now. आप देखो the amount of people buying insurance going forward. This space is going to be what should I say? It is a CAGR story for next 3, 5, 10 years, and that is how one should look at. अगर आप पूछो कि next साल में कैसा करेगा, it should do decently, but I'm not hoping a big budget returns from any of the insurance company in a very short span of time. Upasna has asked about banking. I remain positive on the banking sector. It's coming out of a very bad cycle. Last 3 years, 4 years, this all NPA mash. We all know what all kind of news, GST, everything had a bearing on the banking sector. After all this bashing, cleaning up of their balance sheets, certain banks dying out. We all know what happened to the likes of Yes. तो जो भी कचरा था वो काफी कुछ निकल गया है. यहाँ से ये देखना है कि who took the opportunity and took the lead in this sector, and you will get the answers that who will do good ahead. So अगर you are already, I'm sure आप सबके पास बैंक accounts होंगे, you all would be seeing the type of banking infra in terms of IT infra that all banks are creating. Use them and judge कौन सी banking app is rather converging with IT and providing you the best solutions. Next 3 से 5 साल, those are going to do wonderfully well. They are not supposed to get deterred by so-called fintech companies. Sandeep Sarkar has asked my view on consumption, capital goods, FMCG, utilities. सारे सेक्टर्स पूछ लिए संदीप ने. सो लेट मी टेल यू, इन्फ्लेशन जब भी आता है, कंजम्पशन स्टोरी थोड़ा ठंडा पड़ जाता है. इंटरमिटेंट जर्क्स आते हैं क्योंकि हर एक के पर्स को वो हर्ट करता है, राइट? सो आइदर द इनकम हैज टू गो अप, और एट सम पॉइंट वो कंजम्पशन postpone हो जाता है, and it happens at a later date. So as we can already see, all your FMCG companies are facing the brunt, be it on the margin side as well as demand has tapered off. तो लास्ट पूरा साल लोगों ने घर पे बैठ के बस FMCG products ही खाए हैं, and FMCG had a very good run. We could see a pause. We could see them correcting. उन लोग को price corrections लेने पड़ेंगे. They'll have to increase prices to meet their margin requirements, and demand might stay a bit subdued until we might see, rural incomes coming back. Even abhi people had a very good year in terms of consumption, and we might see that story tapering a bit. In terms of capital good, in my initial remark itself, I did mention that capital goods is going to do wonderfully well over next 2 to 3 years. और जो स्टोरीज महंगी लग रही है ना, उनके अर्निंग्स उतने ही स्ट्रांग आएंगे. सो कैपिटल गुड्स में क्या रहता है, आपका फिक्स कॉस्ट मॉडल रहता है. सो आपके मार्जिन्स को सिग्निफिकेंट बूस्ट मिल जाता है इफ योर टॉप लाइन इंक्रीजेस बाय इवन 10%. सो इट हैज अ वेरी, बिकॉज इट डायरेक्टली फ्लोज डाउन. सो अभी सारे स्टॉक्स महंगे क्यों लग रहे हैं, क्योंकि सारे बस कॉस्ट एंड्योर कर रहे हैं. उनकी कैपेसिटीज आर नॉट फिल्ड of the capital goods companies, and they were just managing by exporting, by doing other works. जैसे ही capex mode चालू होता है, this capital good stocks come with a big bang, and they usually stick, क्योंकि कोई भी capex 1 महीने 2 महीने में नहीं होता. आज एयरपोर्ट बनाना है, 3 साल का प्रोग्राम है. आज हम लोग खुद देख रहे हैं मुंबई में मेट्रो बनना है, तो कितने साल से हो रहा है. आप ये सोचिए, एक सीमेंट का नया प्लांट लगाना है, वो 2 से 3 साल की स्टोरी हो जाती है. रोड्स एंड ब्रिजेस आर समथिंग व्हिच गेट मेड इन 6 months 12 months, बट ऑल अदर लार्ज केपेक्सेस, बीट कोई कमोडिटी कंपनी ने नया प्लांट लगाना है, 3 to 5 years. सो once a capital goods cycle turns around, and we are currently seeing a green shoots, so agar wo turn around hoke improve hoga, so we might see a good 2 to 3 year window where this industry, where this segment will do well. Utilities, I believe, is a steady state business. वहां पे कुछ big bang नहीं हो रहा है. Rather, India is focusing more on renewables. Coal side पे ठंडा है. So I do not see. So I think that is a steady state business to be in. More of a dividend yield play खेलना चाहिए rather than an investable opportunity. और लो बीटा स्टॉक है, सो कभी भी आपको लग रहा है कि मार्केट्स ओवरहीट हो गए, तो आप वहां पे थोड़ा फंड शिफ्ट कर सकते हो, जस्ट फॉर द सेफ्टी, बिकॉज इट्स अ लो बीटा जोन. वहां पे करेक्शंस उतने शार्प या उतने फास्ट नहीं होते. Nikita, I can't talk specifically on stocks, so I would give it a pass on Bob, and also on TCS. Sorry for that. So Devendra, I wouldn't want to comment on whether 10-year bond yield would rise beyond 7 or not. What I am pretty sure is we all are facing inflation. We have to be cognizant of that. India may, compared to other nations, क्यों कम है? So I laid down all the reasons क्यों वो nations inflation ज़्यादा face कर रहे compared to us. But oil is something which will have a bearing on us at some point, और वो inflation हमें endure करना ही पड़ेगा. That is an imported inflation, जिसको हम नजरअंदाज नहीं कर सकते. All other nations, as I rightly pointed out to you, have their own reasons for which they are enduring inflation, and that will continue. Sandeep, I wouldn't want to comment on InvIT and REIT because I'm not investing in those. On the other chat window, someone has asked, I already answered on the insurance sector. I wouldn't want to comment, Natasha, directly on Glenmark, but if I have to talk on pharma, pharma had a dream run last year. This year is going to be a year of cherry pickings. We need to find stocks जहाँ पे इस level से, after such a strong growth that they saw last 1.5 years, from there on कौन सी company कितना growth कर सकती है, कौन अपने margins बचा सकती है. That is more important for all the companies that you all might be investing. In times of inflation, whichever companies has the power to safeguard their margins are going to keep earning better multiples. गांव को कुछ भी बोलने दो. So even likes of Asian Paints, पूरा गांव बोल रहा है इट्स द सेकंड बिगेस्ट पेंट कंपनी नाउ ग्लोबली, इतना महंगा है, पर क्यों उसको ये वैल्यूएशन दे रहे हैं? बिकॉज इट हैज दैट पावर टू इंक्रीज इट्स प्राइसेस व्हेनेवर इट फेसेस मार्जिन प्रेशर. वी हैव ऑटो, आपको सिर्फ एग्जांपल देता हूं, आई नो अ फ्यू ऑटो कंपोनेंट कंपनीज. तो they cannot, despite ये commodity prices बढ़े, they cannot increase the price in the same fashion as a Asian Paint can do. Auto component company, for example, मारुति को बेच रही है, तो it cannot increase. मारुति बोलेगा हम दोनों शेयर करेंगे, right? So periodic revisions होते हैं, complete revisions नहीं होते हैं, and therefore you see margins impacting. और जो इतना अच्छा लोगों ने रिटर्न्स दिखाया था in terms of margins, in terms of EPS growth last year, we might see that moving towards their averages, you know, historical averages की तरफ move करेगा. But those companies which have the power to improve and manage their margins going forward are someone who will continue to enjoy better multiples. Others, on the other hand, will face that area where, you know, they will move towards their historical average margin scenarios, and वहां पे वो valuation discomfort आएगा. Rajesh, I just shared my view on the paint sector. Now paints को भी आप break कर सकते हो, one on the decorative side. So if, and that is what my belief is, that real estate sector is doing good, we might see, you know, paint sector also performing well. If capex cycle revise, paint sector does well. So paint sector overall in terms of demand, I do not see a very significant problem, but which companies will be able to take price rises and manage their margins are the ones we need to monitor. Mahindra has asked view on fertilizers and power stocks. So Mahindra, fertilizers are expected to do well. If you gauge from my initial commentary, I believe this budget is going to be pro farmer. And fertilizer sector में already government ने इतना कुछ अच्छा काम किया है, and monsoons का अब तक there is no sign that, you know, we are possibly going to get hit by a La Nina or any other such event. So if we have a normal monsoon this year, fertilizer, any which ways we are entering a phase जहाँ पे next within 2-3 months we will see fertilizer stocks in the reckon. You know, power stocks is a different ball game altogether. Now, Sari power companies are talking more on the renewable space, and we all know how Tata Power got the kind of valuations that it is getting right now is because of their renewable play and not for their foregone business that they are already doing. So power stocks is zyada, because rather than that play, we should look at companies which are supporting power industry, you know, in times of electrification कौन कर रहा है, in times of wiring कौन कर रहा है, in times of other such areas which are in sync with power stocks is something which we should look into, because re-rating already हो चुका है. हाँ, scope है, yes it is. क्या PSU power company जो renewable game खेलना चाहती है, if it is able to do that, it will get re-rated as well. But it is a slow drive, you know, because it is a PSU company. We need to closely see how it actually moves towards that renewable space, and if it does it fast, we would see re-rating happening there. Sandeep Sarkar has asked on cement valuations. So Sandeep, valuations in certain pockets are high, but क्यों high है और why will they sustain? If I am saying infra is going to do well, if I am saying real estate is going to do well, So cement has to do well, right? So if cement has to do well, you need to see उसमें से amongst those companies which are the companies जिन्होंने already capex कर लिया है, free cash flow generate करने वाली है, जिनका balance sheet already strong है, which has that brand and the power to exude the kind of pricing that is required for the margins, because currently they are facing the brunt. Petcoke prices are high, coal prices are at sky high, and they are not able to pass on that high price to the consumers. This starting Jan, they have started to take price hikes, all the cement players. And we all know this coming 3 months is the best period that the cement industry has. So we would see very strong demand-driven growth over next 2-3 months. But the biggest source, for any cement is real estate. Around 45% of total sales happens from real estate. अगर आप टोटल देख लो, ओन हाउसेज एवरीथिंग, तो वो रेशियो 55% के ऊपर चला जाएगा. सो इफ एंड व्हाट वी शुड आइडियली सी कि अगर मुझे रियल एस्टेट खेलना है तो मैं कैसे खेलूं? डू आई नीड टू गो आउट एंड बाय अ रियल एस्टेट कंपनी ओनली, जहां पे मुझे ये नहीं पता कि यार कैश कितना अभी भी जा रहा है या क्या नहीं जा रहा है, या कौन-सा रियल एस्टेट प्ले मैं खेल सकता हूं वेयर बाय आई कैन इन्वेस्ट इन अ सीमेंट or I can invest in other ancillary companies which go into the making of a house, is something that we need to answer. But are we really seeing green shoots on the real estate side? We are surely seeing that. और आप एक और चीज देख लो, जिस तरह का हायरिंग आईटी में हुआ है, now this is something also that I am sharing with you all. आईटी इंडस्ट्री का हायरिंग जब भी इतना तेज होता है ना, आप जो आईटी हब्स है ना, वो एरिया में देखना, देयर वुड बी ह्यूमंगस amount of sales, real estate sales picking up in those hubs as well, with this kind of hiring that is happening, and this is going to sustain for a few quarters at least. So we can very well assume कि आगे कहाँ क्या कितना sales आ सकता है. So I think I have answered all the questions. So thank you participants. It was really very nice for you all to join in and give your time. Heartening for me to share my thought process with you. Would like you all to advise your set of clients to come and join us, or even you all can join the dynamic fund, and that's where we are trying to create that alpha that I was talking about. Thanks for the time. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a nice time. I'll join back with you all soon. Thank you so much.